Do straight men find themselves seeking out every person of the opposite sex who may pass by or be in the general vicinity to see their face and determine if they are attractive? Story 1. I see many women around me. An older lady asked me to help her get something from a higher shelf at the grocery store, and she thanked me. Story 2. I am a 56-year-old man. I look at most women I see in public at least a little. I look at them differently than I did when I was young. In high school, I looked and judged every girl's appearance as I walked to my next class. Now, when I see a pretty young woman, I don't look at her in a sexual way. It's more of a good for her feeling. At my age, things like making eye contact with a woman while passing her on the sidewalk, walking behind a woman in a parking garage, or being alone with a woman in an elevator are easier and less stressful. Most women seem more comfortable in those situations when you are 56 and wearing a wedding ring. Story 3. I generally try to get a glimpse of everyone in my vicinity. I like keeping an eye on people. To your question specifically, I do not go out of my way to look at women. In fact, I do my best to avoid looking at women too much for fear of being labeled a creep. However, if I happen to see a woman, I might enjoy the view for a brief moment. Story 4. I generally glance at everyone, males and females. I have always been a people watcher. I try to force myself not to look at women because it causes relationship problems. It is really hard to break the habit, and I often find myself getting into an argument with my significant other. Story 5. I would say I glance at everyone. Males are judged for threat levels, and women receive a mild appraisal during the process because, well, I might as well. However, it is an old military habit, so I do not think it is the norm. Story 6. Not much at all. I am a kind of in-his-own-world guy. There are a lot of girls and guys around. They are all just a background blur to me. Story 7. If an attractive woman with a nice figure is in my view, she is the only topic my mind is focused on until she is gone. Story 8. I am single, so I check women out regularly, but discreetly and respectfully. When I was in a relationship, I did not check women out because I did not want to be with anyone else. Story 9. Usually, I do not look at anyone. I make eye contact with people I interact with, but that is it. If I glance at an attractive woman, I will assess and then move on. Story 10. Not often. I get looked at a lot by women. If I start looking back, it just becomes more obvious that they are looking. I am not a zoo animal. It is annoying, so I just mind my own business. Story 11. Nothing more than a glance. I am not out there trying to make women uncomfortable by staring. There is enough of that already. Story 12. I pretend not to look, they pretend not to notice. It is an ancient game played since I can remember. Story 13. Whenever I am outside, keeping an eye on the people around you is essential to avoid collisions. Story 14. I don't look often. I'm in my own world. Especially when I have a girlfriend, that part of my brain shuts off unless it's her. Story 15. It's like having 15-year-old me trapped in a 40-year-old, but worse now because I find far more body types attractive than I did as a teenager. Story 16. I have wandering eyes, so I tend to look at everyone, to be honest. However, if I see a woman with a notably nice figure or outfit, I might sometimes discreetly glance at her face to appreciate her beauty. Story 17. Not generally. If an attractive woman walks past my view, I might discreetly look her up and down, but that is it. Certainly not out looking for women to admire. As I am married and middle-aged, I have work to do. Story 18. I'm looking at everyone. I try to be aware of my surroundings at all times. If I see a pretty woman, I may do a double or triple take. But then again, if she is not attractive, I still may take a double take. I do not know. I'm just fascinated by everyone. I like to observe people. Story 19. It is not something you consciously do. However, if you see a part of a woman that is attractive, you may find that your eye is just caught and then you look away. I was at a formal event last night, and there was a beautiful younger woman, maybe in her late 30s, who had her legs showing under her skirt. She was very pretty, and my instinctive brain stopped scanning the room when I saw her legs for a split second. It is not something that we do intentionally or think to do. It just happens. To show some cultural differences, I was with my building manager in Amsterdam. She is Dutch, and we met a landlord we had rented property from. He was in his mid-50s and she was in her late 30s. Throughout the conversation, he kept looking at her chest. In the United Kingdom, United States, and Canada, he would be considered very creepy. When I asked her about it afterward, she just said, "Of course he kept staring and looking. I have very nice breasts." Sometimes, culturally, we make these things much more complicated than they need to be. Story 20. I check out women before even noticing myself. If there is someone interesting in the corner of my eye, I instinctively look in that direction. I am unsure whether it is a cultural thing or hardwired. But it is not something I decide like, now I am going to check out women. It is more of an impulse. So, rather seldom I will go around just checking out women. But if they are there, why not look in an elegant and discreet way and with a friendly and non-intimidating vibe? Sometimes, if I am in a good mood, the weather is nice and everyone is showing off their best summer outfit, I will have a little glance here and there, and everyone can look back at me if they like. Story 21. It depends on my mood. Sometimes I just stare off into space and do not pay attention to anyone. When I am not staring off into space, I generally look at everyone, not just people I am attracted to or might be attracted to. Story 22. Rarely. I probably miss a lot of opportunities for interaction, but I have conditioned myself to focus on my task and purpose 24/7. I do it without thinking. It is only later that I wonder, was she checking me out? Story 23. No, I used to, but I realized I was just wasting time instead of focusing on important things in my life. Additionally, those women would not be interested in me anyway. Story 24. I'm always looking, but only quick glances, even at attractive people. If I accidentally make eye contact, which happens, I briefly smile and move on. I am now reaching the age where I am either the harmless grandfather or the dirty old man, and I strive to be the harmless grandfather in my looking around. Story 25. If an attractive person catches the corner of my eye, I might turn my head and look for a moment, wishing it were easier to ask them out. Story 26. No, I can look at a beautiful woman, but it will be a fleeting glance and nothing more. It is difficult for me to perceive as a bed partner a person about whom I know nothing. Story 27. I notice women I am aesthetically attracted to for a few seconds. Then I move on. I might observe someone more in a queue, considering body type, clothing, and personality if they are talking to someone. That said, I go about my day. Have I walked into lampposts upon seeing a beautiful woman? Not quite. I think it is perfectly fine to look at women, bearing in mind it is not obsessively staring and that you do not just see her as an object. Story 28. Most definitely not. I am often very busy and cannot be bothered. However, if I am walking around among people, I generally look at them, though certainly not with the intent of deciding if they are attractive or not. It is not like I constantly go from person to person thinking, 7739. Sometimes I sit and think about who I believe is beautiful and who is not, but it is very rare, and I usually only think about it for a few minutes at most. If I happen to see someone I think is beautiful, of course my brain says, wow, she is amazing. And I might even look for an extra 2 seconds, and maybe smile if I was not already, but that is about it. Story 29. I look at everyone regardless of gender. I may look about half a second longer at more attractive or unique-looking women, but it's not like I am specifically observing every woman. Story 30. I can't help but glance at feet sometimes if they are nice. For me, it is like walking around with prominent features just out on display, a large figure right there in my face. Story 31. I do not go out unless it is to work or the gym, so losing social interaction and seeing women where I do not usually see them is like a sugar rush. I get those wondering eyes. Story 32. I generally just view women as other people, even the attractive ones. The only thing that affects me is if I think I might have a chance with them and am attracted to them, then I kind of short circuit because I am convinced they can tell I am interested. Story 33. I sometimes get stuck looking at an attractive woman in close proximity to me. It's like I feel drawn to look, but I have to fight my inner self. It's just weird, I know. Story 34. I try not to make eye contact, but I do look. It is a conscious effort not to look. 3 years in a relationship. Story 35. Never really. I will say hi if they speak to me and remain polite, but that is it. I have a bad history with them. Story 36. For me, I see people, then notice obvious features such as clothes, style, body parts, and attributes, and recognize familiar things to identify a person, object, style, or face. I think it is an inherently natural process to notice and assess very obvious or pronounced features, regardless of sex, gender, or expression. However, looking at specific demographics of people has an unconscious priority based on one's personal standards of physical and sexual attraction. Therefore, this behavior could be observed as straight men constantly checking out women. Story 37. Not very often. I am an introvert and would rather not be around people unless necessary. I usually try not to look at anyone because it could be an invitation for them to talk to me, and I do not want that. Story 38. Yes. To be honest, I check the body first, then check the face if the body is good enough. Not in a creepy or aggressive way, it is just a habit. Maybe not right, but true. Story 39. We do not actively seek out, but will turn our head at anything sexually provocative to our brain as an instinct and sometimes have to actively resist it. Her face, while important for attraction, will not be the first thing I notice. For example, if standing in front of a woman with cleavage on display, it takes willpower to maintain eye contact, as if gravity is pulling my eyes away from hers. Story 40. I look around a lot in general at all people, including girls I am interested in. I do not think it is creepy, but it makes me an easy approach for some strange people in public. Story 41. Straight married man here. I look at everyone. It is a normal human thing to do. No ill will or bad intentions. Story 42. I look at everyone around me to see if they are armed. If you mean check them out, sure, it usually happens discreetly, especially if it is someone who caught my eye. I do not just look at people to know if they look good or not. It is more subconscious, I guess. Story 43. I do not really look at women in places where I know I will not be seeing them often, such as public places like malls. Story 44. I always scan every person in my vicinity for threats and concerns. If I find someone attractive, I will linger a little longer. Story 45. I don't really do it on purpose, to be honest. I generally have a quick glance at a woman's eyes, chest, legs, and feet. I don't know, they are just attached to legs, and I like them a lot, so I have a look. Painted toenails or accessories like anklets definitely get my attention and draw my eyes down. But yeah, I don't know why feet. It's just a split-second glance, with my eyes only, of course, not my head and not making a scene. So yeah, I'm not some crazy or deranged person. Just a respectful glance. Story 46. I look at everyone. My attention stays longer on people who are notable or interesting. I am more interested in women than men, so they receive more of my attention, but I try to make sure I am not staring. Can take a second to notice, though. My eye movements are not something I am aware of or conscious about most of the time. Story 47. I don't really pay much additional attention. I kind of pay attention to everyone around me for navigational reasons. Story 48. I'm bisexual. I think I can speak for many straight men as well. I don't seek out beautiful women, but I do enjoy looking at a beautiful woman who passes by me. That being said, it's more of a, oh cool, she's attractive. Anyway, very rarely is it, she is absolutely gorgeous and exactly my type. It is difficult to take my eyes off her, but I need to keep walking or eating. This happens less often with men, as my type is much more narrow. I find nearly all women attractive in some way, but I am only attracted to a specific type of man. Story 49. Generally, especially at work, those who want you to notice them make it obvious. It's a win-win situation. You get to see a cute girl doing cute things, and she gets an ego boost. Story 50. I check out everyone I can when they are around me, not in a sexual manner but for threat assessment. I am also the person who sits facing entry points and exits when dining out. If a threat appears, I want to see it coming. I do security and work with law enforcement officers daily. It has been emphasized to me to be vigilant and observant. Story 51. You don't have to be straight, just have an attraction to women. Pretty much everyone is practical if I'm idle and people watching. If it's a huge crowd and they're walking or moving, obviously not everyone, because your eyes aren't fast enough. In a room when I'm not busy, I've looked at almost every woman at some point. Some can be dismissed from peripheral view alone. I've also looked at most of the men as well. Story 52. When I was younger, I noticed them all the time. Nowadays, I hardly ever do unless they say something to me. Story 53. Yes. It is not even seeking out certain shapes or sweeps. They will draw my attention from the corner of my eye. It is literally like a heads-up display. It happens before executive function. Story 54. I'm married, so no, but as perspective, I'm on a trip abroad by myself and went to a pub last night. It ended up being extremely busy, and I was sitting beside an extremely attractive woman, also by herself. The number of men trying to insert themselves into the very small space between her and me was shocking. The moral is, yes, probably yes, but the most attractive women get the most attention from the most confident men. Story 55. I size up people when first meeting or seeing them. It is important to note if someone is holding a weapon. I will take a glance otherwise and note attractive features, but I do not really stare. If we have a conversation and they seem like someone I would want to date and feel compatible with, I then start taking more frequent or longer glances while trying to be discreet. Partly to find something to compliment them on if we stop and have another conversation, and partly to find a flaw to end any thoughts of attraction so I can move on. Story 56. I honestly do not care about the people I surround myself with because I know it will not go anywhere, so why bother? Story 57. Not too often. If anything, when I see a girl, most of the time I just look in the other direction completely because I think to myself, no, it seems dangerous. Story 58. I look at everyone, but I pay closer attention if something stands out, such as a ridiculous outfit, short shorts, or a beautiful face. If a woman is wearing very revealing clothing, I will look several times. Story 59. Whether a female is attractive to me or not, she cannot go unnoticed. However, I never stare or make anyone uncomfortable. It is just a biological response. Story 60. When the opportunity arises, I do it. I keep it to myself. Not just women but men who look fit because they inspire me. Story 61. I observe the people around me carefully. I try to be fully aware of my surroundings. If I notice an attractive person, I take a quick, appropriate glance and then return my attention to my own life. Story 62. I glance at everyone most of the time, though sometimes I can be in my own world. Women and men. If there is an attractive woman, maybe a slightly longer look. Story 63. Just the cashier. Eye contact is important when they are casually talking to me while scanning my items. Otherwise, no. Story 64. Yes, of course, any man that does not is lying. The only times I don't is if I am really focused on something or engaged in conversation. The thing about it is that I have never obsessed about anyone. Ever. Just that moment, then gone. If I think about it, I can remember a few. One was a girl I saw on the beach. For some reason, she is the first one and just about the only one that really sticks out in my mind. Even here, it is not like she will come to mind unless I see something to remind me, like this post. Has that happened to anyone else, where there is one who struck you so significantly that you can always remember her and when you saw her? Story 65. I take note of them, and it depends on the current situation whether I pay more attention. If I am driving and there is a woman running on the sidewalk while wearing headphones and traveling in the same direction, I have no idea if she is aware of her surroundings. The possibility of her stepping out in front of me before I get ahead is a momentary worry. There are a few middle and high schools nearby, and it is more important for me to be aware if there are groups of girls, 3 or more together on the sidewalks, especially if any of them are riding electric scooters. I do not want to be involved in an accident caused by one of us not paying attention. Story 66. At least for now, I am not single, so I don't have to feign interest. It's a relief. I can go back to pretending most women do not look incredibly bored and miserable, and I can avoid some of those actively giving me dirty looks for existing. Story 67. I give everyone around me a once-over. It has nothing to do with attractiveness. It is just situational awareness. Most people do this regardless of gender. Story 68. I, a 25-year-old female, was traveling alone on the metro yesterday when a group of 10 young men boarded, occupying all the seats across from and next to me. My anxiety was very high. Hopefully, I was not being scrutinized intensely by these individuals. Story 69. I observe everyone around me for situational awareness. Very rarely do I see a woman who deserves a second look. Story 70. Constantly, I live in Thailand, and the women are absolutely exquisite. I don't bother with Caucasian women anymore. They do nothing for me. Give me a dark, skinny, long-haired, slow-eyed maiden any day. Story 71. To be fair, 99% of the time you notice when you walk by a property with really pretty flowers or something. There is no intent, just a second of appreciation for the beauty. Then it is back to the regularly scheduled programming. Story 72. I give a quick scan to anyone in the area. It is just a bonus if they are attractive, and even more so if they are friendly. This is not scoping out potential mates. It is just being aware of my surroundings. Story 73. I am always observing everything. This past Thursday, a patient came in with an impressive figure. I am not sure if it was a Brazilian butt lift or not, but I noticed her outfit for a while. Then I continued with my workday. Story 74. To me, the world is a museum, and the number one attraction is women. I glance at them, but they are not sunsets. In other words, I am careful not to be creepy. Story 75. All the time, more or less. It is as instinctive as blinking and about as easy or hard to suppress. It also means nothing. Just because someone is attractive or pretty, it has absolutely no bearing on my desire to get closer to them. Story 76. Not really seeking out so much as taking note. Even with a particularly attractive woman walking around, there is less intention and more curiosity. Story 77. I am always looking at faces, smiles, energy, and the way a woman walks. Sometimes I just like to watch a woman move gracefully. Story 78. We see all women. That does not mean we want to talk to every girl we think is cute. Some guys do not approach girls. Some do. For me, if everything seems smooth, I will walk up and start a conversation. However, I am not approaching every girl I find attractive. To answer the other part of your question, I need to see your face. If not, we are just lusting. Story 79. Pretty much all the time. The brain subconsciously evaluates every woman I see. Of course, I do not actually act on it. Story 80. Every single one, and it is not just the face. I assume that women do the same. On a few occasions, my girlfriend nudged me and quietly said, "Look at that appearance, wow." Story 81. I am single, so I make it my hobby to look at attractive women. Bonus points if they look at me too. If I have a partner, by some miracle, they would be invisible to me. Story 82. As a young single and eligible man, quite often laugh out loud. More so when I am out on the weekends, I am scanning the room for attractive women who did not bring a man. When I am working, occupied by some activity or with friends, I pay less attention. However, if someone passes by with clearly distinctive physically attractive features, I will almost involuntarily look. Story 83. I generally glance at all people in general, calling it the hunter instinct. I have fast reflexes and notice unusual things quickly. It has become second nature to glance around. Specifically, when it comes to women, I give a very short passing glance for the most part, but will look longer at someone my heart finds very attractive. Unlike some other commentators, I am never discreet when looking at an attractive woman. I make sure to let her know with my eyes that I enjoy looking at her. I am often asked whether I model or am sponsored by a gym wear brand or clothing company. Maybe my looks are quite good, which could explain why women enjoy passing smiles or ask me indirectly if I am single. Story 84. I just enjoy people watching, but nearly every woman catches my eye a bit longer. long enough for me to see who she is and what her characteristics are. Story 85. Most of the time until you realize how many beautiful women you see daily. I, a 33-year-old male, have also been single my entire life and have reached the age where you become somewhat desperate for a life partner. However, I also face the reality that finding a committed partner will be one of the hardest tasks to accomplish in my life. Story 86. Noticing all, of course, like just about everything or everyone in my immediate environment. Ogling or checking out happens, but it is not constant or blatant. I do not want to make the space around me feel unsafe or uncomfortable. Story 87. I do, but it is to make sure they get across the dark parking lot safely or to ensure their purse does not get stolen from their shopping cart. Story 88. Never. I have spent years practicing avoiding looking at women, which at my age of 42 is especially important for a safe and peaceful life. Story 89. Of course, I notice women around me but do not pay them any particular attention. I am more focused on myself, to be honest. Story 90. I always scout my surroundings for potential danger. Generally, women are less threatening. I also cannot see people's faces very well unless they are close by. I probably look at them less overall. Story 91. Just to know where everyone is relative to me so I would not bump into anyone. Other than that, I avoid looking at women as much as possible to prevent any unnecessary drama. The looks of disgust on their faces when they accidentally make eye contact with me also help a lot in not looking. Story 92. A couple of glances here and there, but actually seeking or looking at a girl. Now, if she looks good, then yes, I would look. I try not to make it obvious, but girls can sense when a man looks. Story 93. I don't seek them out because I'm married. But yes, I am silently noticing every woman of my age group who passes by. Story 94. I wish I could find the video on this, but I saw an informal study or experiment where they asked the question, do men look at women anymore? They noticed numerous examples in daily life of men just ignoring attractive women, which they found hard to believe. They went to a busy Florida beach and observed how men reacted to a beach full of attractive women. They watched for interactions where a woman in a bikini walked past some men. They were incredulous as time after time, the men never looked, never paid attention, and did not seem to notice even once. Their disbelief grew as the number of interactions increased into several dozen, until the final number was about 1 in 200. I think this makes sense, and it is generally related to men not being interested in relationships anymore. For example, go on TikTok, and there are thousands of videos of women complaining, "Where are the men? Why don't they approach us anymore? Why don't they look at us?" Story 95. I am a 56-year-old male and notice almost everyone around me, particularly women, sometimes taking an extra glance at attractive ones. I do not stare or ogle. I seldom even turn my head from the direction I am facing. I had an ex-girlfriend who would point out the really attractive women if I missed them. Story 96. Very rarely. I only look if I feel someone is already looking at me. Otherwise, eyes forward and chin up. Story 97. A guy told me once that he trains himself not to look when he has a girlfriend. He finds it strange because if a man looks at his taken girlfriend, he would not want that. If he is single, then he does not have this condition. I am not sure if that is true, but men lowering their gaze are attractive, honestly. Story 98. Guys are biologically wired this way. Hot or not, doable or not within 5 seconds. Women are the same, hot, tall, good children. This is why you take an extra 5 minutes to make yourself the best you can be before leaving the door. You will make, on average, 5 to 10 first impressions every day. Always put your best foot forward. Good luck out there. Story 99. These comments make me very glad I only wear loose jeans now. I disliked the constant attention. Story 100. The male visual processing system is so refined by evolution that we can tell if a woman is attractive within 3 milliseconds of her appearing in our peripheral vision. This detection occurs subconsciously. If there is no indication of attractiveness, we do not look. Here is how it works. I have literally felt my neck jerk my head, and I consciously think, what the hell? Am I having a neck spasm? Then I look and realize, oh, I see why my neck jerked my head over here now. Because there is an attractive woman. Subconscious processes monitor the periphery for attractive women and will jerk our heads to check them out if they trigger attractiveness detection. Story 101. Insecure people. We do not all look just to look. We look because there is movement, color, environment, goofy-looking shoes, man, woman, child, bad car, nice car, something sparkly, and yes, an attractive person. A man whose muscles are so strong he could squish my head. Could be anything. You are not behind my eyes. What you think I am looking at may not be what I am looking at. We could be looking in the direction of an attractive person and not even paying attention, thinking, I'm hungry. That food she is looks good. Here is my question for you. What do you care? Why is this tiny thing taking so much space in your mind? He is either going to be with you or not. We are all on this mud hole we call Earth for a brief flash in time, approximately 75 summers. The first 15 you were a kid, the last 15 you will be old. So ask yourself, how many summers are you going to waste with idiotic thoughts like this? Enjoy your time here. Enjoy the person you are with. Story 102. I look at everyone and briefly scan their body and face to judge them accordingly. I definitely notice when an attractive woman is around, but I also notice all the unattractive people and the men. My thoughts are usually something like, normal person, walks strangely, cool shoes, oh attractive woman, what are they doing, oh curvy woman, look at this person, that person is overweight, oh nice appearance. I don't know why, I just do. Story 103. I have been looking at women since I was 4 years old, hanging out the window of my father's Chevrolet. Every time I leave the house, I look, not necessarily in a lustful way, but I enjoy seeing women move. Story 104. I, a 31-year-old female, have always avoided looking at people when walking around, so I have no idea if any man has ever looked at me. I never thought about it, but when I was with my ex-boyfriend, he would tell me that men were looking at me, which seemed unbelievable to me at the time. But now I realize I am unique. Story 105. 24/7. Like it is an instinct. Become good at being discreet, and you can do it with impunity and enjoy it for the rest of your life. It is one of the free pleasures of life. They do it too. Only they are way better at it than we are. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.